You fought for Brexit on the promise of British sovereignty. No one else's politics, no one else's courts, yet you now want to tear up the European Convention of Human Rights and drift towards a US-style system where basic rights depends on politics, money, and who's in power. Just look at the American right now. People executed despite doubts about their guilt, millions denied.
Farage drops the bombshell Starmer about to rip up the Human Rights Act. Was Brexit just the warm-up? Watch the full clash before the surrender is signed.
End the status quo. I'm joined down the line by Fahima Mohammed, political commentator. And we've done a lot of history this evening, and we've talked about the good intentions, and we've talked about Straw saying it was never meant to be interpreted like this. And I thought, one of the comments that stuck out there to me was that when this was put into law, it wasn't intended to give people who come into Britain illegally new iPhones. So what say you about the current state of the ECHR?
Hi, thanks for having me. I really do believe that you are just quoting tabloids when you're discussing that. I don't think the law is that kind of like juvenile to sort of say, we're putting people coming in first for mobile phones and things like that. That is absolutely incorrect. Nigel Farage, you fought for Brexit on the promise of British sovereignty. No one else's politics, no one else's courts, yet you now want to tear up the European Convention of Human Rights and drift towards a US-style system where basic rights depends on politics, money, and who's in power. Just look at the American right now. People executed despite doubts about their guilt, millions denied, healthcare as human rights, mass incarceration, tearing families apart. That's when human rights are guaranteed above politics, right? And the ECHR is a vision, and Britain helped write that. It is not in the dark ages. It is also current now when it comes to human rights and laws and acts that actually is, taking away the horrors that we still experience today. We still have wars. We still have interference directly and indirectly that is happening with the democratic states, including Britain. Without it, we are opening a door to any government, left or right, rewriting the rules itself without being marked. And
all right, so you're saying, so what you're saying, in effect, is that this convention, this court in Strasbourg, judges, they're more important, they're better defenders of our liberties than we, the voters, when we go to the polls and choose our governments. That's in effect what you're saying, is that democracy doesn't work.
I'm saying that they will mark it. We will still have, and we still do. The ECHR does not actually, take away what we already have. They are just making sure that it's done properly. Otherwise, it's like as if, you're saying now that we're going to end up with a situation like a Netanyahu government, okay, in Israel, hollowing out judicial oversight until democracy itself, is at risk. This isn't about foreign judges. It's about protecting British people from any government that goes too far. And that's what the ECHR is about. Not Brussels, but it's the British legacy.
I get it. You understand. You see it as a protection.
I want to begin with the hard fact that the 1998 Human Rights Act was not some innocent housekeeping exercise. It was a quiet revolution that took the British people without a single vote. Sir Keir Starmer, who now sits in Downing Street, spent years at the bar, and then as director of public prosecutions, arguing that Strasbourg case law should be treated as almost sacred. When he tells backbench Labour MPs that nothing is off the table, he is not moving toward reform, he is buying time so that the same legal class that has fed off the act for 26 years can regroup and protect its empire. Let me give you the numbers nobody else puts on the screen. Since the act came into force, UK courts have cited Strasbourg in more than 14,000 separate judgments. That is not taking account, that is surrender. The Supreme Court's own statistics show that in asylum cases alone, claimants win 62 of appeals when they invoke the convention, but only 34 when they rely on purely domestic law. The gap is the power that foreign judges now exercise over our borders. If that is not rule from abroad, the words have no meaning. The argument that the convention was written by British lawyers after the war is the greatest con trick of modern politics. Yes, Sir David Maxwell Fyfe helped draft it, but he did so for continental states that had just lived under Gestapo terror. He explicitly told the Commons in 1950 that Britain would sign the treaty without in any way altering the supremacy of Parliament. The 1998 Act tore that promise to shreds. Lord Irvine, who piloted the bill through the Lords, admitted in a 2003 lecture that the act was designed to give Strasbourg greater influence and to reshape our constitutional culture. That culture was the common law liberty that had grown up since Magna Carta. Irvine's candor is never quoted by The Guardian or the BBC, but it is there enhanced for anyone to read. We are told that only the far right wants change. Yet the first call for withdrawal came from Tony Blair himself in the immediate aftermath of the 7/7 bombings, when he realized that deportation cases were being blocked by Strasbourg. Gordon Brown commissioned a green paper in 2009, asking whether a new British Bill of Rights could reduce reliance on the Convention. David Cameron promised in 2010 to repeal the Human Rights Act and introduce that British bill. All of them backed away once the legal establishment closed ranks and the broadcast media screamed fascism. So the idea is not extreme, it is simply that the political class is terrified of the forces it has created. Look at what has happened in the past 12 months. The Court of Appeal held that the government could not remove asylum seekers to Rwanda because Strasbourg might one day rule that Rwanda is unsafe. The Supreme Court then struck down the government's plan to criminalize the glorification of terrorism, again because of Strasbourg jurisprudence. Meanwhile, illegal channel crossings are running at record levels 29,000 last year, 9,000 so far this year, and every single removal is now subject to last-minute injunctions based on Articles 3 and 8 of the Convention. The Strasbourg Rule 39 order that grounded the first Rwanda flight was issued at 2 a.m. by an Albanian judge who had never set foot in Britain. That is not an urban myth, it is paragraph 17 of the Home Office affidavit placed before the High Court. The defenders of the status quo always invoke the horrors of the American death penalty. I have a different comparison. In 2022, the Danish parliament passed a law allowing asylum seekers to be transferred to processing centers outside Europe. Strasbourg has not dared to strike it down, because Denmark has made clear that it will leave the convention if the court tries. Result: channel traffickers now tell their clients to avoid Denmark and aim for Britain, where judges are more compliant. The lesson is brutal, but simple: countries that assert sovereignty get results, countries that bow to Strasbourg get rubber dinghies on the beach at Dover. I am tired of hearing that we would be isolated if we left. The United Kingdom is already outside the EU, already outside the Schengen zone, already outside the euro. We trade more outside Europe than inside it. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States all manage to respect human rights without submitting to a supranational court. The Commonwealth Charter of 2012 affirms human rights and the rule of law without creating a court to enforce them. The idea that Britain is uniquely incapable of governing itself is an insult to every British citizen who has ever served on a jury or stood for local council. The economic cost of the act is never mentioned. The Ministry of Justice's own figures show that compensation paid out under the Human Rights Act has risen from $3 million in 2001 to $178 million in 2023. That is money taken from schools and hospitals and handed to convicted criminals because a prison cell was too small or a parole hearing took too long. Add the legal aid budget, the cost of extra judges, the cost of housing asylum seekers who cannot be removed, and the bill runs into billions. All of it is met by the British taxpayer, while the lawyers who profit from the system donate generously to the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats. Let me address the charge that reform would threaten the Good Friday Agreement. The agreement commits the British government to incorporate the Convention into Northern Ireland law, but it does not specify how. Parliament is sovereign. It can repeal the Human Rights Act and replace it with a British Bill of Rights that gives equivalent protection without the Strasbourg overlay. That is precisely what the 2022 Bill of Rights bill sought to do. The Democratic Unionist Party supported it. Sinn Féin objected, but Sinn Féin objects to anything that strengthens British sovereignty. The argument that we must keep the act to placate Irish Republicans is perverse. Sir Keir Starmer knows all of this. He was the barrister who advised the Labour government in 2006 that prisoners should get the vote. He was the DPP who blocked the deportation of Abu Qatada. He is now Prime Minister, and he tells us he wants smarter solutions. The only smart solution is to restore parliamentary supremacy. Parliament should legislate that no UK court may set aside an Act of Parliament on the ground that it conflicts with the Convention. Parliament should legislate that Rule 39 orders issued by Strasbourg have no legal effect in the United Kingdom. Parliament should legislate that the final court for human rights in this country is the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, subject only to the will of the elected Commons. If that means passing an act with the words notwithstanding the Human Rights Act, so be it. Parliament did it with the Illegal Migration Act 2023, and the sky did not fall. The British people voted for Brexit because they wanted their laws made in Westminster, not Brussels. They voted for Boris Johnson in 2019 because they wanted immigration controlled. They have been betrayed on both counts because the Human Rights Act keeps the door open for Strasbourg to overrule them. I do not believe that Sir Keir Starmer has the courage to pick a fight with the legal establishment he helped to build. But I do believe that the pressure from the Red Wall MPs, from the right-wing press, from the public who sees small boats every night on the news, is now so great that he will have to give ground. When he does, I want a clean break, not another fudge. Repeal the Act, withdraw from the Convention, and trust the British people to protect their own liberties as we did for the 700 years before 1998.